Chair of the Milton Fire Space Needs Committee. Board of Selectmen, good evening. Members of the Warrant Committee. And for all those you watching. I want to give you a brief update, and I think it's probably a good idea for all committees that work for you as town meeting members to come here and occasionally tell you what the heck we've been doing for the last year. So I'd like to, one, say thank you to the committee of this project. Tom Kelly's in front of me here, one of our committee members, Chief Grant, Tom Hess, and Brian Toohey. But also thanks to the town administrator, we had another member join us, Mr. Bill Ritchie from the Consolidated Building Department, and he's been a big help for us in the last couple of days. A couple of things that we've done, we put an RFQ, a request for qualifications, out in the street on Friday. So that is out there for 30 days. And it does a couple of things. Listening to what was said here at town meeting when we made our report in May, we asked this successful vendor to, one, review the existing documentation and conditions at the 3 fire stations. 2, we'd like to have an analysis of proposed sites for their suitability to accommodate fire stations that will meet the anticipated needs of the department. 3, a functional and space needs program for each station based on the committee and fire department input and current industry standards and best practices. And we'd like to have them include meetings with the fire department as required to solicit and review all that information. Number 4, a comparison of the relative advantages, disadvantages, and cost of renovations and additions versus new construction for each station. To develop concept plans, narrative descriptions, inclusive of site work and environmental systems, and outline specifications sufficient to establish a scope, level of quality, and cost for each station. And then real quickly, number 6 was to design and come up with a design and construction schedule for the 3 stations, develop construction and total project cost estimates. It's anticipated that construction cost estimates will become a fixed limit of construction costs for each station when the town approves the projects for design and construction. And finally, conduct periodic and milestone meetings with the Milton Fire Space Needs Committee and have 3 neighborhood meetings where the fire stations are to understand the concerns of the neighbors and what they would like to see in their fire stations. We're on pretty much a fast track on this, and we did brief the selectmen last Wednesday on the 29th. But to give you an idea, this RFQ was issued, as they say, on Friday night, on the 1st of May. We have 30 days, so we'd like to have our responses due, and we're receiving some inquiries now, as Bill keeps us informed, and that will end on the 1st of June of 2015. We will conduct responder interviews of the 3 finalists, hopefully in the week of the June 29th. That week, we'd like to have 3 of them in here. We'd like to make a decision, ready to go to of a possible vendor to the Board of Selectmen sometime around the middle of July, I'm sorry, and then make that recommendation soon thereafter. We anticipate having a contract awarded for the to do this design work, hopefully by the 1st of September. And then as we get into the next year, by the 1st of January, I think January 5th is a day that always rings good with the Warrant Committee, we'd like to have an article ready for them to discuss back here at town meeting the creation of a fire building committee. We feel that the work that we're doing is not the work of the building committee, but in fact just putting all these figures together. So we'd have a presentation ready for this town meeting next May at the annual town meeting with some presentations. I'm not sure what that goes on from there. There's a lot of preliminary discussions we've had with the Board of Selectmen about cost, which we really don't have an estimate on right now. What the timing of fire station construction might look like, where do we start first, all things that we're asking to be developed with this consultant and meeting with townspeople during our meetings. So that's where we are right now, and I want to just thank everyone, both from the town side. I'd like to thank Anne Marie for all the work she's done with us and the Board of Selectmen, and also Bill Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, sir.
And one final quick update. Mrs. Sheridan, you're recognized. And Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Linda Lee Sheridan, Precinct 9.
And Brian Kelly, Precinct 7.
So we are two of the founding members of We Are Milton, and we're here tonight just to talk very briefly about our third annual Milton Music Festival and Fireworks. So it will be held this year on Saturday, June 27th, so get your cell phones out right now and mark that calendar in there. And beginning at 3 p.m., we invite you to spend the afternoon exploring the artwork of some of the finest artisans in the Boston area, many of whom are from Milton. Give your children a chance to sit in the driver's seat of big rigs and industrial and antique military equipment that will be the touch-a-truck portion of our festival. We'll have arts and craft activities and face painting for the children too. You can also sit and enjoy, if you don't have children, sit and enjoy the splendid view of Boston as our top-notch lineup of musicians fill the airwaves with some of your favorite tunes. We will have 7 hours of a variety of music, including jazz, pop, a cappella, dance band, and pipes and drums. Be sure to bring your dancing shoes. When the sky darkens and the lights twinkle in the distance, the fireworks will light up the night with the Boston skyline as your backdrop. This will truly be a night to remember. This is a family event. You can come and go as you please. Details will be available on our website, and Brian's going to talk about the Sunday event.
The website is wearemilton.org, and we also have a Facebook page. On Sunday, June 28th, we'll once again host Celtic Sunday. That will be from 1 to 8:30 p.m. The afternoon will feature many of Boston's best Irish bands, musicians, and vocalists. Among this year's performers are Feeney and Sons, Erin's Melody, Pauline Wells, Devery, legendary Dublin fiddler Patsy Whalen, and several other prominent Irish performers. Headlining for the day is the internationally renowned Irish group Gaelic Storm. Speaking of a night to remember, they're from the Titanic movie back in 1997. And let's see, a Celtic Sunday will once again be a magnificent afternoon of brilliant music, great food and refreshment. Grab your chair and sunscreen. There'll be something for everyone, young and old. How many in this room went to part of the events in the last 2 years? If you could, let your constituents know about this and remind them about it, we'd really very much appreciate it. So we hope to see you there. It's going to be a great event. Thank you.
And just one more thing, it's totally free and it's funded by donations, so it's totally free, so spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, members, we are at Article 31, which you will find on page 63. To see what sum of money the town will vote to appropriate for the support of schools for the 12-month period beginning July 1st, 2015, and to act on anything related thereto. And it is recommended the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading Recommended. Schools, School Department, recommended FY16 of $40,714,500, which is also the total. And that to meet said appropriate...
We have a revised recommendation. Those numbers are a little different.
Yes. So hopefully this was passed out on Monday night, and it covered several articles, and I believe the chairman of the Warrant Committee spoke about the fact that since question 1 on the ballot was passed, it freed up money that was reallocated, and that's what this is all about. So let me read the recommendation again, because that's the motion that you'll be voting. It's recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading Recommended. School Department, $40,747,500 for total schools recommended FY16 of $40,747,500. And that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $40,172,758 be raised from the tax levy, and the sum of $574,742 be raised from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash. And I would recognize the chairman of our school committee, Michael Doulis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Zulis, Precinct 3, Town Meeting Member and Chair of the School Committee. Good evening, everyone. Before we discuss Article 31 and our budget, with your indulgence, we'd like to acknowledge some recent comings and goings on our committee, including first the just concluded tenures of two long-standing and distinguished members of our committee. Let me see if this works. There we go. Is Mary Kelly here? Mary Kelly served on the school committee for 12 years. And I think we have a picture of when Mary started on the school committee, those many years ago. We also have, I believe, a picture of Mary's first school committee meeting. Throughout her tenure, Mary Kelly paid scrupulous attention to the budget and how it affected the learning environment for students. She became an expert on those matters, and she was one on whom we all relied. More than that, Mary was an advocate for special education programs, and above all, and I think this was the most important thing, she was a champion for ensuring that all the children in Milton had the opportunity to thrive and to achieve in the Milton Public Schools. Mary Kelly had a direct and positive impact on thousands of children in our community, and that impact will continue for years to come. Please join me in acknowledging Mary's efforts on our behalf. Linda Lee Sheridan is here as well. Linda Lee served on the school committee for 9 years, again, a very long time. We have a picture of her when she started on the school committee. And then I think the additional picture we have is the first meeting she had with the facilities committee looking at the buildings at the time, those many years ago. As much as anyone, Linda Lee Sheridan is, did I say Linda Lee Kelly? I did, didn't I? As much as anyone, Linda Lee Sheridan is associated with and responsible for the 6 beautiful buildings in which our students matriculate currently. For that alone, we owe her a great debt of gratitude. But she did much more than that. Over the last 9 years, Linda Lee has lent to our committee her talent, her wisdom, and her guidance as a professional educator. Her legacy is that she, along with Mary, improved the educational opportunities for thousands of children, and that legacy as well will continue for years to come. Please join me in acknowledging Linda Lee's efforts on our behalf. So one more time, the winds of change have blown through our committee, and we have 2 new members. So I would ask you to join me in welcoming our 2 recently elected members, Dr. Kevin Donahue and Sheila Egan Varela. So that was the fun part. And now we segue into Article 31 and our budget. I'm going to give you a brief overview, and then Mary Gormley, our superintendent, and Dr. Glenn Pavlicek, our assistant superintendent for business, will dig a little bit deeper into the details for you. Over the last 2 nights, and in your warrants, you've seen a lot of numbers. You've seen charts and graphs from Ted, and that's all very important. But more than that, I think a budget is about choices. And the fiscal year 2016 budget for the schools represents hard choices that we had to make. But these hard choices, you should know, represent the collective judgment and the consensus view of our school leadership team, of the school committee, and the input from the PTOs around town as well. And when I say our school leadership team, that means all of the principals of the schools, the other department heads, including the director of pupil personnel who oversees special education programs, and of course our assistant superintendents and our superintendent. It is this collective group that has helped develop this budget along with the school committee and helped develop the priorities that we seek to meet. So, how did we develop our budget? First, generally speaking, we have our priorities. And our general priorities that we seek to fulfill with this budget is to allow all students to thrive and achieve in our school system. And then we have our advancement initiatives that we've been putting forth now for the third year. One, emphasizing early literacy and achievement. And that means that every third grader will be able to, every Milton student will be able to read at grade level by the end of third grade. Two, the data showed us a few years ago that there were gaps in some of our subgroups, so we've sought to direct resources to close those gaps. And three, we've sought to advance STEM initiatives, and STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And the effort there is to acknowledge changes in education, changes in need, and changes in the economy. So those were our priorities. And the collective view of all of our groups, and as we developed the numbers, was that our budget to meet those priorities was just over $41 million. Now that budget was a 4.4% increase over the prior year's budget. And as you'll see, if you look at the context, that 4.4% increase is well in line with the last 5 years of the school department budgets. In fact, it is a smaller increase than all of those years except for one. That was not the end of the story. Despite its best efforts, the Warrant Committee told us that we need to cut from that budget. The fiscal realities were such that we need to cut $347,000 from that budget. And that's where our particularly hard choices came into play. Again, the school leadership team, along with the school committee, with input from the PTOs, made the hard choices to make cuts in materials, make cuts in administrative staff, make cuts in high school electives, and also to make cuts in teachers, specifically a world language teacher and a history teacher in the middle school. It is important to remember, again, that these cuts were the collective view and the collective judgment of the constituent groups who were involved in making these decisions. And again, if you'll notice, the context of this is that our increase now over last year's 3.53%, which if we go back, you'll see that that is significantly, a fair bit lower than any budget in terms of its increase over the last 5 years. I'll put that on just for a minute so you can see those numbers. You'll see FY12 through FY15, and then FY16, we're looking at an increase now of 3.53%. Now, it is true that an increase of 3.53% is not a cut. It is an increase. But you'll see when you get into the detail that there have been cuts in administrative staff and contracted services. Not large, but there have been actual cuts. The big picture of this budget is that this district is investing in people and technology in order to provide top quality education for our children. When I say people, I mean the teachers. And you'll see that one of the biggest drivers of this budget is teachers' salaries, as it should be. This school committee and this school administration have emphasized teachers in the classroom, and we believe that we need to be competitive in terms of our salary structure in order to provide top quality educators in this district. Now, how do we measure success? There's a lot of different benchmarks for measuring success. You can look at MCAS scores, you can look at SAT scores, you can look at assessments, you can look at college entrance. There's a whole range of benchmarks for success. I'm going to suggest to you tonight one benchmark that is a little bit more nebulous, but in some respects no less important: perception. And for perception, let's just go quickly to the media. 1 week ago, the Boston Globe published an article entitled "Housing Market Rebounds in the Boston Area." And the second sentence of that article was talking about a couple trying to choose a place to live. And that was, the first part of that sentence was, among the location, they picked Milton for the schools. And then later down in the article, it pointed out that medium single-family home prices south of Boston have bested the peak from 2005 only in a handful of cities and towns. But Milton leads the way with a prices 11% higher than in 2005. Ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest that that juxtapose is no coincidence. That is a powerful connection. It is a testament to what this community has built, and we need to make sure that it continues. And so with that, I will pass the baton to our superintendent, Mary Gormley, who will lead you through some of the specifics. Thank you.
Ms. Gormley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Zulus, Warrant Committee, Selectmen, town meeting members, and citizens. We're going to give you the context of the Milton Public School budget, Dr. Pavlicek and myself, and with us tonight is our new Assistant Superintendent, Janet Sheehan. Big round of applause for her appointment. First, I want to start with the vision. The vision of the Milton Public Schools is to build and strengthen a dynamic community that challenges all students to thrive and achieve. And in order to create this educational system that supports the vision for all students and advances the Milton Public Schools, the following advancement budget initiatives outline our priorities. I want to give you the context. Mr. Zulus did an outstanding job. 18 months ago, the school committee, every Tuesday morning, under the direction of the finance subcommittee, charged the leadership to work together and propose to move the Milton Public Schools ahead. What were the initiatives that would move the district ahead? So every Tuesday morning I want to, because as Mr. Zulus indicated, you may wonder how this budget is developed, and we recognize that this is 55% of your town budget, and we so respect that you want the detail behind that we meet every Tuesday morning under the leadership of Mary Kelly for the past years as our chairperson, Leroy Walker, and Mike Zulus. And they charged the leadership team to identify the initiatives. I explained this to you last year, those of you who are with us and in the viewing audience, but those of you new to town meeting. And we brainstormed the arts, all of the different disciplines, K through 12, and based on the student data, we identified these 3 initiatives. Again, in every national publication, you'll see the indicator of children reading at the end of grade 3. Children who can read at grade level, advanced and proficient at the end of grade 3 is an indicator of their success in school. All of our children at the end of grade 3 are not reading at grade level. That is our primary initiative. Secondly, based on the data, internal data that we give all through the year, and the MCAS data, we identified some subgroups of children who were not achieving. Now, what subgroups mean, African American children were not achieving at certain grade levels in certain disciplines, children with disabilities and special education, children whose families had identified as low income. Again, in the aggregate, our students are making unbelievable progress, but we identified subgroups that weren't making progress. Thirdly, in the area of science and STEM, again, STEM every single night on the news. For all of our students, we wanted to advance in science, technology, engineering, and math. We wanted to offer all Milton Public Schools students, starting at kindergarten and first grade, an exposure to STEM and iSTEM, intensive study in that area. The correlation to math and science, to young children, again, once you meet somebody in these areas, you ask them, when did you know you wanted to go into engineering? When did you know you wanted to go into math? When did you know your strength in science was a love for yours? They'll talk to you about the elementary and the middle grades. So we identified these 3 areas, and we came to you, and you have supported, Glenn? You have supported us during the last 18 months. I want to also tell you that we have gone out to the PTOs. We go out to every PTO. For a lot of you, you may have seen this presentation. I often tell groups that the warrant committee could give the presentation. The school committee could give this presentation. We do this collaboratively. Any one of our principals could give this presentation. We go out, the school committee goes with us, we hear the feedback from the parents, we go back to these finance subcommittees, and right into last week, we were reordering our reduction cut list. So again, we listen to the public, we listen to the constituents, and we've done this on TV, and from many of you, we get outstanding feedback from these presentations. All of these presentations, and I should say that these initiatives, we use the latest research that exists, the latest research that exists, and it's all on the web. All of the research that suggests and supports the importance of early literacy, if you go to our website, you'll see the latest and the best research in the STEM area, closing the proficiency gap. What are the techniques that you should use to close those proficiency gaps? What are the techniques you should use so that all children are reading at the grade level at the end of grade 3? So, before we begin, the finances that you gave us over the last 2 years, to put them in the context, $515,000 and $538,000 over the last 18 months, the last 2 years. We're currently in the 2nd year. These initiatives were built on research, and again, for all students. Our goal is that all students, we advance all students in literacy and science and STEM, but our goal and our charge is to accelerate the learning for those children who are not making benchmark. If we might go to our first, emphasizing early literacy. We're going to, and I appreciate that we have received feedback from town meeting members who want to know the detail behind the spending. All of the research you'll see, national preschool, the importance of preschool, the correlation to children who go to preschool, the children that are entering the Milton Public Schools. So what we did this year was to run a pilot with our advancement money. And we identified children from across the district who aren't in any kind of preschool, formal or informal. And we ran a pilot at the Tucker School, but we drew from children across the district. And next year, the advancement budget will fund a session every morning and every afternoon for us to identify children who are at risk of failing at the ages of grades 3 and 4. And we will bring them in. It's housed at the Tucker School. We ran the pilot this year with the advancement funds. We know from the research, if you identify those children who are not exposed to preschool and you get them into the schools and you start that early literacy, the opportunities for them to succeed multiply. And so we've divided our purchases in between personnel and instructional support. In instructional support, we have requested $5,000 for additional materials to really expand that preschool to the preschool experience that many of your children have had. And then what we've done with the advancement funds over the last year is used it for targeted instruction. After school, Saturday, summer. Our Milton Public School budget would never allow us to do that. And we know from the research, you know from national publicity, about extended day, going to school all year, longer school days. So what we're proposing in this next year is to identify rising third graders, again, that target of reading at grade level at the end of grade 3, and bring those rising third graders in during the summer before third grade and during Saturdays, and before the divide in their achievement gets larger in 4th and 5th grade, target them with extended Saturday and after-school programming. The third instructional support that we're asking for always is professional development. Again, our professional development budget has to provide for every teacher in every discipline K through 12. This targeted funds in the advancement budget will be summer professional development on early literacy to complete the training for all our K1, 2, and 3rd grade teachers, and a consultant for the elementary teachers to come in and in the Readers Writers Workshop to finish the 3-year cycle so that every teacher has the skills to really drive these 3 initiatives and to provide for advancement for all of our students. And the last bullet under instructional support is to purchase leveled readers for kindergarten and grade 3 at the sum of $20,000. In the Milton Public Schools, historically, when we buy a new curriculum, we buy it 1 year at a time. What this advancement initiative has enabled us to do is we're requesting these funds, the science curriculum for all elementary students over 2 years. Historically, in the Milton Public Schools, that would have taken 5 or 6 years. You only get to 3rd grade once. If you're in the 4th grade and the implementation is in the 3rd grade, you're 1 year behind the implementation. So these advancement funds enabled us to complete the leveled readers at grades K1, 2, and 3, and complete the cycle over 2 years. I want to assure you that we continually evaluate the success and the gains that our students are making through the evaluation process, how our teachers are implementing these instructional techniques so that our grades K through 3 children are taking these formative assessments every quarter. Janet Sheehan, John Phelan before Janet, Glenn Pavlicek, and myself, we go out and we meet with the principals. We go over every single child 4 times a year. What are these children being provided for? Are they making advancements? What kind of supports do they need? What are the supports that you're giving them beyond the school day? What is the involvement of their family? And then our metrics will be, you should know, and perhaps through the press or watching the meetings on TV, that we have gone into the PARCC assessment. So your children in the Milton Public Schools, the state has remained with MCAS in science, but I'm very proud to tell you through a grant with the Copeland Foundation and the Capital Fund, we were able to complete the infrastructure, and Milton students are in the midst of taking online assessments. 1 year from now, every child in Massachusetts in the public schools would be taking online assessments. I would tell you, our technology director said to me the other day, I'm so proud that our students haven't been left behind. They're taking the tests, their teachers are supporting them. When these tests are given, sometimes all of the adults go into the room to give the supports. But we will get, next September, October, all of the PARCC, which would be the MCAS results back, and we have all of the data is online, how we evaluate student progress. Our anticipated outcomes are for early literacy, that all students will be reading at the end of grade 3, and the Milton Public Schools students will reach their cumulative proficiency index. Again, the state has established indexes for us at the end of each year for our students that we have to meet. Our next initiative, closing the proficiency gaps. Over the last 2 years, you've funded reading teachers. And again, when we look at these cuts and reductions that we have to make, there are no extra people in the Milton Public Schools. You who have been with us for years know we may have had assistants at the elementary schools. We don't have assistants at the elementary schools. We don't have extra art, music, library, or phys ed. But what we did restore through the advancement budget are reading teachers, individuals who have skills to meet with individual students or small groups of students, again, to help them break the code so that they can read and then achieve. And these reading teachers are making a difference in the elementary school. Dr. Karen Spalding implemented a partial reading teacher at the Pierce School. The results of the achievement of those children and the gains in grade levels was astounding. So through one-time funds working in the Warrant Committee, our proposal next year is to put an interim reading teacher in at Milton High School. So for new students to the Milton Public Schools, students who aren't reading at grade level, we will take one of their periods at Milton High and they will only have reading instruction from a reading specialist. And again, the correlation to that targeted instruction for a whole year, just as we would take English or math or science or social studies to be able to break that code and bring them to reading at grade level. And then when historically our current 4th and 5th graders haven't benefited from those reading specialists because we targeted them at grades K1 and 2. So next year we would catch up with all of our children by putting for 1 year a reading teacher at grade 4 and 5. Any children who aren't reading at grade level would have that targeted instruction until they're reading at grade level. And we work with them during the school day, after school, if it requires summer instruction. For instructional support, again, looking at extended day projects, programs, there's a program that has been in the Brookline Public Schools and in New York City, and we're working with the National Science Institute, correct, Glenn? Foundation, and they're looking for a grant. But what we've identified is rising 8th graders. And I see Dr. Giuliano here. Dr. Giuliano always taught us that the gateway to success was algebra in the 8th grade. He was before his time. Think about your own education. Algebra at 8th grade was an indicator that you were going to succeed in high school. Now the gateway is calculus. If you're going to succeed at university, if you're going to go into any of those I-STEM or STEM careers, you must be a student who enrolls and succeeds in calculus. So what we're doing is identifying rising 8th graders. We're giving them after-school assistance. We're working with them in the summer to really pre-teach the coming grade level and then giving them support. These are children in the subgroups. These are children who are not succeeding, who are not going to, on their own matriculation, enroll in calculus, get into a calculus class. So our target is for all children at Milton High School to enroll and succeed in calculus. And I analogize with my own family. You don't wake up in the 11th grade and go into advanced placement. You have to start to build those skills in the kindergarten and the middle school. So this calculus project would require a sum of $25,000. The second, instructional support at the Pierce School. Every support we implement, we use internal assessments to gauge their success. So the most successful program at the middle school, I could have Ms. Martland stand up with me and talk about this, is to identify students and 3 to 4 days after school, give them targeted instruction by somebody who becomes their mentor. That person works within the Pierce School, that person communicates with their teachers all during the day, that person gives them the support. So that would be a $20,000 line item. And the next item through the advancement budget that we have done, and this will enable us to fund it this coming year, we identify rising 9th graders, students who have not experienced success in the 8th grade or at the middle school. We bring them to Milton High School. They are pre-taught math and English, and then they are supported until they experience success through the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. I often say to the teachers, they're outstanding, but it takes more than a summer to assure a young 9th grader is going to succeed and graduate and break that code, and again, become one of the individuals who goes into one of these I-STEM or whatever career they choose. Elementary extended day, in each of our elementary schools, they have identified with this $20,000 budget number, the program that's appropriate to their school, whether it's Saturday morning at the Collycock Cunningham, if you go by and see students going into the Collycock Cunningham, or if it's a Glover before or after school. But again, those students are targeted. We meet with the principals. We monitor the internal assessments so that we know what's being done in this targeted time is increasing student achievement. The next $20,000 line item is we have worked really as a team, K through 12, to put those assessments in at the elementary. And so this $20,000 would enable us at the middle and high school to purchase the assessment materials that then would be administered to the students and provide the feedback to the teachers. The teachers give unit tests, the teachers give units after individual tests, but these assessments would parallel to the national and the state testing, giving our teachers further data on how our students are excelling. $10,000 in Summer Institute for closing the proficiency gap, and again, the analogy that the ultimate demonstration of if you have mastered a discipline is if you can write about it. You might understand it, you might be able to articulate it, but when you can synthesize it and you can explain it in paper or on the computer, then you've really demonstrated that you own the skill. And so at the middle school, we're working at the elementary school, we want to put in a formal reading program at the cost of $8,000. The metrics that will measure whether we're making progress in closing the achievement gap, the proficiency gaps that exist in the Milton Public Schools would be these formative assessments. Again, these at each level, for every child who's at risk, we come up with an individual plan. I often analogize it to no child being left behind. There is no child who we don't discuss what are the supports we're giving that child, what are the communications with the family, and the student data analysis. At every one of the schools, all of the teachers sit down and they go over all of the data that they're administering to the students. Study Island, many of you in the room know this piece of software that monitors students' achievement, and again, the PARC results. And the anticipated outcomes will be, we're working hard to have all of our subgroups make the target that's been established for them. And this data is so specific that we also are provided data that I might receive a certain percentile, but what was my growth? What was my growth? So our target is to have every single student above the 50th percentile, which will indicate to us that every student is learning, every student is achieving. The next initiative, Advancing STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. At the middle school, we have tried a pilot, just one pilot, for iSTEM, intensive study in science, technology, engineering, and math. And the request is for a new .8 position, which will enable us to provide every student at the middle school an iSTEM experience. So every student will still have their science class, but if every middle school student at the PS school will be able to have an additional class of iSTEM. Again, not all year, this will be a partial class. There'll be one teacher, and we'll be able to provide every single student this experience. The instructional support, $25,000, and this is really a partnering with the MFE in the middle school to be able to really purchase the curriculum, provide the professional development to implement this program. $10,000 in text materials and supplies. I want to bring you back to, at the elementary school, we have a French immersion program and an English program. And 3 years ago, we began a STEM program in the English track in the Milton Public Schools that is hugely successful. I look over to Mr. Burns and other people in this room who have spoken up and advocated how really these children having this experience at first and second grade. So next year, the program is moving up to the 4th grade. That would be a $10,000 purchase. And lastly, the $35,000, I spoke earlier that the purchase last year was to purchase the science materials in grades 3, 4, and 5. Now we would purchase the science materials in K1 and 2, and that would complete the cycle. And in the Milton Public Schools, it's usually a cycle that lasts 5 to 7, sometimes 10 years before we really purchase another curriculum set of materials for a whole grade level. 10 years ago, the Milton Foundation for Education's theme for celebration was a biotech lab at the high school. We have used those funds, anyone on the MFE will tell you, as a savings account. We have not had to go to the Milton Public School budget, the town's budget, and we have used those funds. Those funds are gone, and so this would be a purchase of $70,000. All of you who are in this technology area know the way the digital equipment has changed. We had 2 individuals come in from a local university and evaluate. This was half the number that they suggested, but $70,000 would give us the funds to totally upgrade that biotech lab at Milton High School. Along with that, under instructional supplies, $20,000 in summer PD for the teachers across the grade level in science and STEM, and $10,000 for targeted professional development to support the teachers, again, not in the iSTEM, but $10,000 to really correlate to that K1 and 2 science purchase, to give the teachers the training all summer and all through the next school year to support them when we implement the new curriculum. The metrics that we would use to evaluate the science and STEM implementation, again, the iSTEM program in grades 1 through 4, the internal assessments, and our goal is for all of our students, they are tested at the end of grades 5, 8, and 9 in science for all of our students to score advanced and proficient. And the anticipated outcomes would be that we would reach all of our CPIs and all of our students would again achieve in the science MCAS scores. We've provided here, this is a free, excuse me. This presentation will be on the web tomorrow, but what we've provided for you, the initiatives on the left, we've divided the purchases under staff, technology, instructional texts and materials, and extended time. And again, this is a collaborative effort. We have brought these down to the purchases that we think will drive student achievement, will provide our teachers with the instructional skills to meet all the matrices and the levels that we want every single Milton Public School child, student to achieve at. Dr. Pavlicek is going to continue the line item detail.
Thank you. Glenn Pavlicek, Precinct 10, and Assistant Superintendent for Business Affairs. Better? So our proposal for the fiscal 16 budget. Again, this is our proposed budget to the Warrant Committee was $1.7 million more than last year's fiscal 15 budget, and this is basically how it gets there. You've heard the advancement budget proposal that the superintendent has gone through, $591,000. In the fiscal 15 budget, we had some one-time funds that were used, appropriated for us last year, $500,000. So that is backed out of this year's budget. They were one-time funds, so we're not using them again. We have negotiated wage agreements of approximately $1.3 million. Outside of the advancement budget, we do have need for 2 new special education positions, and I'll talk about these in just a moment, and also a new preschool coordinator half-time position, again, outside of the pieces of the advancement budget. So those are increases in staff, or proposed increases in staffing. Our 2 maintenance people were moved over to the Consolidated Facilities Department as of July 1st. So that's an amount of money that's being transferred over to the Consolidated Facilities budget, as you'll see in a couple of articles. We have some special education tuition and bus increases of roughly $100,000. We have some facilities costs, utilities and maintenance of roughly $100,000, and other costs of about $95,000. So that's how, in one slide, how we get to the $1.7 million. The advancement budget proposal we've been through, the $591,000 here, the early literacy closing proficiency gaps in science and STEM. There are 3.3 full-time equivalent positions, if you were counting, in the advancement budget. So there are 3.3 new positions as part of that. As we'll see, our proposal proposes some new positions, but when we get down to where we actually can afford at the end with the recommendation that's in front of us tonight, we'll actually be backing some of those off. Negotiated wage agreements. This includes rolling over our existing staff, includes steps and lanes, and a cost of living adjustment this year. This is the third year of our contract. It is a 1% split year, which means that staff are getting a 1% raise in September and then another 1% raise in January. So it's the cost equivalent of a 1.5% raise. This number doesn't include the advancement salaries. It doesn't include the new SPED preschool positions I alluded to a moment ago. And it also backs out, it's an apples to apples, we backed out the maintenance salaries from the prior year, so you can see just what the cost of the existing staff less the maintenance people is. So that's roughly $1.3 million or 4.19%. The 2.5 new proposed positions, a K-8 inclusion specialist for special education. We have gone more and more towards inclusion in special education. We have fewer students out of district. We encourage students to be into co-taught classes or mainstreamed into regular education classes. We try to keep students out of substantially separate classes unless there is an absolute need to do so, and even then we try to include them as much of the day as we can. With that level of inclusion, teachers need support, and we don't have any inclusion specialists to help the teachers deal with that level of inclusion in the classrooms. We need a K-8 inclusion specialist to work on that. And that's the cost of keeping kids in district. Lacking this, we end up in substantially separate and out-of-district tuition. So this is a benefit to us. High school special education teacher, this is a need-based position. We have students at the high school with special needs, and the needs have determined that our staffing right now is not sufficient to deal with the students we have there. We need to add one position at the high school. The preschool coordinator is a different item. As you can said in the advancement budget, we're adding a half of a preschool teacher. Was mentioned we have this new preschool program at Tucker. We also have a preschool program at the high school that's linked to our high school child study program. We also have preschool programs at the Cunningham and Collycutt for children with special needs and role models. We have a lot of different things going on with preschool programs across the system, and currently they each are their own little entity. Principals at the various different buildings are responsible for them, but as we grow with preschool, we need to coordinate this. Preschool is, in many ways, the largest growing population we deal with. We, students, particularly with special needs, at 2 years and 9 months, they're into early intervention, and we have them at 3 years. So we have students from 3 till their 22nd birthday, but preschool is a large growing population, and it needs some coordination. So we're proposing a half-time preschool coordinator. I mentioned a moment ago the 2 positions that are our maintenance positions have now been transferred over to consolidated facilities. So salaries and overtime is a net decrease of $140,000 to our budget, which will move over into the consolidated facilities budget. Special education costs, out-of-district tuition increases. We get an estimate of where our out-of-district tuitions are. We don't have the final numbers yet. The $75,000 increase is actually a decrease in some sense, because last year, as the footnote indicates, we had $100,000 in one-time spending for that for a very expensive placement that rolled off. So once you roll that off, this 75 increases really, it was rolled off in the one-time funds I mentioned earlier. So this is actually a net decrease of $25,000 in out-of-district special education, which is good news. Transportation increase. Little buses cost a whole lot more than big buses. We spend $900,000 a year on little buses. We spend $660,000 a year on big buses. This is a 3% increase in special education bus transportation. Looking for a good job, open a special education bus transportation company. Facilities costs, heat and utility increase, maintenance cost increase. Heat and utilities, we all know heat and utilities are going up. Some of the good news on here is the town has signed a contract with a local LLC. Those of you who know the old Stop and Shop warehouse down in Reedville, we have a company has an agreement with them and has now finished their permitting process. We're putting 5-megawatt solar farm on the top of that warehouse down there. The schools currently have solar panels on all of our buildings. That 5-megawatt solar farm will have us getting all of our electricity from solar, and the town is buying the rest of it. So we will now be 100% of the school's electricity will be coming from solar, and I would have to ask Mr. Ritchie, but I think it's about 50% of the towns on top of that. So that's holding this down considerably. As I say, the permitting process is done with that. Construction is supposed to start this summer. We expect this to be online late in the year. We're hoping for late fall. Maintenance cost increases. These lovely new buildings are 10 years old. And so maintenance starts to increase. We need to replace some of the equipment in these buildings. It was mentioned in the capital budget, there were some HVAC controllers we needed to replace. For example, the heat system in this building is run by a computer that runs under Windows 2000. The controller that links to it cannot handle a newer computer. We have to get a whole new front panel for the heating system. That was part of the capital budget. If that Windows 2000 machine breaks, we are in deep trouble because you can't buy one, first off, unless you go to a flea market somewhere. And the system we have wouldn't be able to work with a modern machine. So that was part of the capital request. At 10 years old, things start to happen. So our maintenance budget does go up as time goes on. Other non-salary costs, this was the $95,000, et cetera, at the end. Policy administration, we've decreased some of our costs. Instructional leadership decreased some of our costs. We've added some more in text materials, professional development. Other instructional services are up a little. That's support, that's among other things, regular ed transportation, and athletics and clubs and so forth all fall into the other instructional services category. SPED contracted services is down $15,000. Again, we are doing more with our own staff in-house and trying to contract less out to contractors. So that's good news. And technology costs are going up as we incorporate more technology into the system. So those are the drivers for our budget. As you can see, 49% is regular ed instruction, 75% is special ed instruction, 25% is special ed instruction. So 75% of our budget is going directly to instruction. Facilities, 7%. Instructional leadership, 7%. Instructional services, 8%. So instruction and its support is the lion's share of our budget. It's what we do. And again, just to break it up, these are the categories we're required to report to the state under. And you can see that the increase here of all those numbers really is in the instruction, the 3.5 advancement positions there, and in special education, where we have 2.5 positions in there. Now, as I say, that's a net increase of 5.8 positions. But when we come to that's again in our request, what we have tonight as a recommendation does not fulfill the request. So what you will see in this is that, in fact, 3.5 of those positions we are going to have to back off. We're just not going to be able to do them. And so one of the new positions and some existing positions are going to have to be cut in order to make the level of spending that's being recommended tonight. On the system-wide level, we'll lose 1 support staff in special education. We currently only have 2. This is difficult. It means other people are going to have to pick up other things. More work is going to be put on our special ed team leaders. This is a difficult position to lose. Level funding special ed transportation. We've been negotiating and relooking at our routes and trying to save some money on that. We think we can back this money off the special education budget and the special education transportation budget and hold it where it is for this year. So that's a cut we would make. Copier replacement reduction we have equipment that has to get replaced every year. This would slow that down. We have copiers that have made in excess of 2.5 million copies. They're getting a little tired. Professional development, some of the non-advancement professional development we would need to back off and concentrate primarily on the professional development. And we would decrease our increase in text materials and supplies. We had proposed to add more text materials and supplies. We would have to add less text materials and supplies to the budget. That's for part of it. That's the system-wide part. There are some specific parts to the elementary, middle, and high, and I will let the superintendent speak to those.
So you're going to, no, that's all right. Are you going to switch that? That's all right. I'm good. Dr. Pavlicek spoke to the preschool. What the preschool coordinator, 7 years ago, we had 1 preschool class at Milton High School. We now have 4 full preschool classrooms at the Collycott School. So district-wide, children identified at the age of 3 go to preschool. They have a right in Massachusetts for education programming. And so this is becoming a growing population, almost like a 7th school. We were looking to have a part-time person oversee that program to ensure that all the children are provided the special services to meet their ed plans. We will not fill that position. That would be a position that was proposed that we won't fill. Dr. Pavlicek made a note here that originally we were going to have a reduction totaling $500,000. We replaced one of the anticipated cuts was going to be one of 2 teachers in a special needs class at one of our elementary schools. We restored that position. We were also going to make reductions in art, music at the elementary level. Those have all been restored. At the middle school, the reductions will be the reduction of a history teacher. We often refer to the jewel of the district, the teams at the middle school. We've never had to break into the teams at the middle school, but what we'll do to achieve this reduction is to eliminate a history teacher at the 7th and 8th grade. So anyone who's had a child who went through the PS school, when you go into the PS school, you meet with the English, math, history, science teacher. The history teacher will be off team and provides instruction to students over 2 grades. And then the next, and this is really an indication when we do these reductions, we do these reductions as a team. We go and report to Finance Subcommittee. We look at every level of the organization, administrators, teachers, text materials and supplies, secretaries. And so what we're going to do, the reduction will be the elimination of 1 of 2 assistants at the PS school. And then what we'll do is hire a dean. So the savings The administrator is at a higher level than the dean. The dean will come in at the teacher contract level and will identify a savings of $40,000. The dean will not be able to do the evaluation, the supervision, and some of the responsibilities, obviously, will be eliminated that were assumed by the assistant principal. Next. And at the high school, the reduction is going to be in world language. This one reduction probably equaled the time and analysis that all of the other reductions took, because, again, there were discussions around not eliminating a teacher in a test, we call it a testable subject. World language is not a requirement at Milton High School, but 90% of the students take 1 or 2 foreign languages, but this would be the elimination now. You can't have a student who's in French 2 and all of a sudden say we're not going to offer French 3 or Spanish or Latin. So this will be a reorganization and could have possible impacts in our advanced placement program. But to achieve the cuts, there will be a 1.0 elimination of a world language teacher at the high school. This is a freestanding presentation, as I said before, that will be on the web tomorrow. We've tallied up the cuts and reductions totaling $347,000, 3.5 in FTEs. And on behalf of the Milton Public School students and teachers, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to this motion? Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Henry Carr, Precinct 10. I'd just like a quick explanation of the discrepancy between the original warrant and the revised. One's about $33,000 and the other, for the total, and the free cash is $3,000. So if somebody could explain to me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Excuse me, for clarification, explain the reason there's a difference or what the difference is being spent on.
Oh, why?
Why
Yes,
is there a difference?
Right.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, you're recognized.
Ted Hayes, Warrant Committee Chair.